Okay.
Okay, Chris, can I kick it off?
Yep.
All right. I'd like to call to order the Finance Committee meeting of Tuesday, December 13th, 2022. It is 1:01 p.m. and we are live on a digital platform. Present today, we have myself and Eric Biter, myself, Liz Mealy, and Eric Biter from the Finance Committee, as well as Bonnie Katz and Adam Yoder here from City Council. Then from the administration, we have Chris Black in IT, Derek Slaughter, our mayor, of course. We have Molly Steele Shrimp from HR, Sam Onyx from the fire department, and Tracy Rash from finance, as well as our distinguished city clerk, Janice Frank. And then it looks as though Kevin Fink is here as well from Gallagher. That's all the folks that we've got in currently, and we'll go ahead and kick it off. We have 5 items on today's agenda. Item number 1 is an ordinance amending Part 1 of the codified ordinances of the City of Williamsport to create an emergency fund for the City of Williamsport. Adam?
Thanks, Liz, members of the Finance Committee. So what you have in front of you is an ordinance to, Liz, as you had read, create and establish a emergency and reserve fund. So during the last reading of transfer ordinance 4 for rescue plan funding, we maximized the lost revenue allocation that we were taking. And in first reading of the budget ordinance, if you remember, we made those adjustments as well. And then this is the codification and the technical mechanism to establish that fund. And there's a couple of different aspects to what's in front of you. So what I did was I went through and looked at a handful of other third-class optional charter cities. And forgive me, I don't remember what I pulled from what city, but I found a few different aspects that a couple of different optional third-class cities had in establishing this type of a fund. Okay, so all that this is doing is creating an additional article under Section 135, which outlines the Department of Finance Administration roles, and in there is a lot of the meat and potatoes surrounding capital budget, general fund budget, in addition to the optional charter. There's some language in there about how we're able to invest city money, that kind of stuff. So this adds one more section of that article in the codified ordinances. So there's 3 main aspects in here, of which make this a little bit unique in addition to just establishing this. So first off, 135.10b speaks to the investment of funds. One of the other municipalities that I had looked at had some language essentially just saying that, the city treasurer is allowed to invest this money to ideally help it organically grow while it's sitting there to accrue a little bit of interest. This sentence and clause simply enables the treasurer to do that in line with the other stipulations that we have codified currently. Item C speaks to essentially creating a potential way to automatically put some future funding into this. And this will, I would imagine this would spur a little bit of debate because given that we are running at an annual deficit of anywhere from like $2 to $4 million, this would impact that, right? But what this says, and I pulled this directly from, I think it was York. I can't remember exactly which one. It was either York or not Reading. I'll think of it at some point. But I thought this was interesting. So, and I thought it would be a good starting point to have that conversation. So this puts in any excess tax revenue collected into this rather than just going into the bottom line of the general fund. So what this does is it doesn't touch anything that's at the bottom line or a starting balance of the general fund, but it creates a mechanism to put future money in there automatically rather than council doing it through the budget process. And then the last part of this essentially outlines how money would be used, right? And this is just saying that a 2/3 vote of council is needed to remove money from this fund to transfer it somewhere else to be used. And there were a couple of different municipalities that had this in there specifically, and they actually had different approaches to quantities of votes needed. There was one municipality that said it had to be 6-1, for example. So this lines up with the current requirements that we have to essentially raise an amount of money in our budget process. And this lines up with some recommendations from Norm Lubin, our solicitor. So Norm did review this. He had a couple of just verbiage changes, and they are incorporated into this and reflective of this. And the verbiage changes were really outside of the 2/3 thing, just basic legal stuff. There was nothing really that impacted intent. So that's a little bit of the background, a little bit about where I was able to find some stuff and how I put this together. Welcome any questions, comments. Again, I would suspect there's a couple things in here that probably would spur some debate. We've got 2 readings to flush that out as well. And I think that's a good thing. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and I think this is a wise idea. Just to be clear, Adam, my take on the past several years of budgeting through the city is that we would not expect to annually be depositing any additional funds into this reserve fund. Is that your impression as well? We have not had we have not had a surplus budget in a number of years, I don't believe.
That is correct. Because for as long as I remember, and I even think going back before any of us were even on council, I think that we've been operating like this for a while. So when we don't have a surplus budget, we've been using our ending balance to balance our actual next year's budget, meaning we run a deficit every year. So we don't have a surplus. So this kind of helps us do that, right? It gives us a saving mechanism to stash money away for pretty big emergencies, right? I mean, and we've only openly talked about this last week, right? We've got 2 pretty big complex issues facing the city right now and have been for a while: Graffius Run and the levy. The dynamics of each of those projects continuously change, and so that makes it very hard to, I think, adequately plan a funding strategy. And so this gives us the ability to kind of do that while we try to, I think, hone in on the moving target and talk about emergency. We also just lived through 2 years of a really crazy pandemic. And I don't want to, use that. It's a great example of an emergency that you never think is going to happen that actually does happen. I mean, 3 years ago, I don't think any of us would have been really thinking about a pandemic, living through it, and having to deal with the ramifications of that. It would have been nice to have something to respond to, whether it was just initial response, whether it was fiscal resources to help offset some burden to taxpayers in a number of different ways as well. So this positions us to do that.
Mm-hmm. And just to be clear, what we're looking at that as a 5-person vote, and it is all of council, not 2/3 of the members in attendance, correct?
I'll have to get clarity from Norm on that. I mean, that is what I would hope the intent would be. So if we need to modify the verbiage, I would support modifying that. I think that is a good intent, and that's how I envision this personally, and looking at and putting this together. So I mean, maybe we change it to 5 yay votes. So I'm happy to look at that, but that's what I would personally, as one of 7, prefer. I don't know what others would think, but I'm happy to look at that.
Okay, well, we can discuss it on Thursday anyway. Mm-hmm. Just a question. Of course, as we all know, semantics is exceptionally important in politics.
It is. It is.
So anyway, I think on first blush that this, this is a wise idea, as we discussed in the council meeting last week. it is not clear that by the end of 2024, we will be able to sort of appropriate the funds for Graphius and the levy in such a manner as we would need to accomplish for ARPA. So by moving ARPA funding into the general fund, that enables us to take funding from the general fund to create a rainy day reserve that would allow us to spend that funding on Graphius Run and the levy at a point in the future when we actually have a good solid plan that wouldn't force us, I suppose, to rush into any sort of plan that might not resolve the issue ahead of schedule simply because we were trying to allocate the funds. But Eric, what observations do you have on this item?
Not anything that hasn't been mentioned. I would like to understand a little bit more about the investment funds. So section B, within that, is the city treasurer currently allowed to invest any funds that we may have in excess? What is that something that's out of the norm? That's why it's specifically mentioned here in this particular ordinance.
Yeah, so that was actually called out in a different municipality, and I thought it would be a good idea to include it here. So for that purpose, for just redundancy's sake, to eliminate, I guess, any interpretation, intent, or clarity, right? So our city treasurer does have that ability now, and I think it's 135.08, which is 2 sections above where this is going in Article 135 that outlines that ability and also where. So that outlines, utilizing Pliget, which is the I believe that's the shared mechanism through the state where municipalities are able to invest various funding resources. It's very risk averse, so you're able to accrue a little bit of interest, but more than you would get, of it just sitting in a bank account, right? So you'll see 135.08 noted in that section, Eric. That is a section in our codified ordinances, so it's a reference back to somewhere else that outlines that. So does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay. Yeah, Eric, I guess to further question, we're currently investing several different pieces of funding, including ARPA funding, to receive to receive investment or interest income. But I think that's just right. Adam's right. Kind of a fail-safe. Make certain that we know that this fund is able to be invested.
And I just wasn't sure if general fund monies had different implications for investment when it came to ARPA funding and so on.
Well, I think all of our investing is relatively curtailed by some pretty serious federal restrictions on, we're not putting it into like the, some sort of crazy, active fund in the stock market or anything like that. And we couldn't even if we wanted to.
No Bitcoin.
Yeah, we have a bit more diversity, I think, available to us with pensions, but also not much there. Obviously, it would not be wise to gamble with city. So anything further from either from members of council or from the administration on this item before we move on?
Liz, if you don't mind, the way this is written can't be factored into the budget because it's written as if a cash account is included in the city council portion of the budget, which a cash account isn't part of the revenues and expenditures. So I am trying, during the council meeting, I tried to clarify whether this was a separate fund, and I received the answer yes. So that's the way I had treated it when I tried to revise the budget, but needed additional clarification. So my impression from what you've talked about is that you actually want to create a separate fund, like a liquid fuels fund or the capital project fund. And what that means is that from a budgetary perspective, we would bring the money in from ARPA, and then the budget that's flushed out would be a transfer out to a reserve fund that is accounted for separately. So this portion of this where it says it's in city council's budget is in the general fund. That I'm just trying to understand what I need to do.
So Tracy, let me answer that. So that was one of the other changes that Norm had recommended from a legal perspective. And I'll be honest, when I read that, when I originally drafted this, I had used language from a different municipality that had that in there. Norm recommended that change, and I had thought, okay, well, he must understand, the intent here, and I was assuming, to be fully honest with you, that that language was better for that. If you're able, and we can do this at your convenience between now and second reading, maybe you, myself, and Norm can jump on a Zoom call and just flush out what that actually should be, and get you the direction that you need. Would that work for you?
Well, I mean, if you want the budget revised for Thursday, then it's got to be a call that has to happen tomorrow.
Well, that's fine. I can circle back with Norm. That's no problem. So I'll talk to Norm, and I can shoot you a note and see what your schedule is like tomorrow, and then we can go from there.
Okay. So is the intent what I'm saying, to create a separate fund?
Yes.
Okay. So
yes.
So what I'm saying to you is the revisions that were made today or yesterday to the budget ordinance are incorrect then?
So when you mean, you're talking about to what we made last week, is that what you're talking about?
What the budget ordinance that you put together either yesterday or today, I'm sorry, I'm losing track, that changed how the budget is presented for the Thursday meeting, that wouldn't be correct.
So how so?
Because you said that there would be only the money coming in to the general fund, but the money would be going out of the general fund and a new fund would be established for budgetary purposes.
Yeah. So when, now I get what you're saying. So whether it's coming in or going out, if you look at the actual budget, the money is getting transferred into, in any event, the money's getting transferred into through the general fund. So it's an expenditure, but regardless, if the value's wrong, I mean, we can adjust that before Thursday's meeting. I really just put that together. I knew you were out. And I knew Derek had a handful of things going on, so I was just trying to help and get that together. So, yeah, if it's not accurate, when you can change that before Thursday meeting. That's perfectly fine.
Let me make a suggestion here, though, Adam and Tracy. This ordinance doesn't take effect until 20 days after the meeting on January 6th, assuming.
Correct.
So actually, the creation of the reserve fund, whatever form it takes, happens in the 2023 budget. Or it happens in 2023. Do you understand what I'm saying? So we would need to change, I guess what I'm saying, and this is a question for Norm, I'm sorry. I understand that it impacts the 2023 budget, but I'm not certain that we should be making those changes to the 2023 budget until it's passed in January, one way or the other.
Until the administrative code is passed, is that what you're saying?
Yes, until the change is passed within the administrative code creating the fund. It really is a question for the lawyers, but I guess what I'm saying is we may or may not need to accomplish it by Thursday.
Yeah, and I'll talk to Norm. I mean, that's fine. I mean, I don't.
Excellent point. Thank you.
But I just want to clarify then, I'm not, am I making this change in the 23 budget, or then I'm not?
I guess,
well,
is it really for me like something we would have to, an amendment to the budget that we would have to pass, much as we did this last time with the clerical error on the capital projects budget for 2022. It would be an amendment to the budget that we would have to pass in January once this ordinance was passed in both readings, passed after both readings by council, and had moved into the 20 days after final enactment phase.
You would definitely have to clarify that with Norm, because
Yep.
what happened was just a clerical error last year. This is actually going to add $3 million to your expenditure budget in the general fund.
Right. It's going to, at this point, add $3 million to our revenues that will fall to the bottom line. Correct?
If
Correct.
it was my impression that council approved the transfer from the ARPA into the general fund. So I'm sorry, I'm just trying to be clear. Then I'm not doing that.
So we made the transfer in the last transfer ordinance. That is correct. We amended the budget, the actual general fund budget in first reading to increase the lost revenue item, as well as to create a line item to move general fund money into this fund. I think really it comes down to a process question. And so I will circle back with Norm and have that answered for Thursday, depending on whatever else we need to do. I don't know that we would need to do anything differently. If the general fund budget is amended as it already is, that money could get transferred into this fund after it's created and the ordinance takes effect. But I'll verify all of that with Norm also.
Well, I would suggest that, and that probably you and Tracy and Norm should try to talk tomorrow. Because it all sounds as though Tracy's concerned that this wording is not accomplishing what we needed to accomplish, right?
Yep, understood.
Because the city council section of the general fund budget is undoubtedly not the right question for the emergency and reserve fund, but how we make it subject to these restrictions, like the appropriations from it have to be approved by council. While it is not a part of city council's budget, that's an open question. Right. So I think that really the three of you are going to have to discuss this tomorrow, one way or the other.
No, and that's perfectly fine.
But I think that your intent can clearly be accomplished. It's simply a matter of how to place the such that it abides by our current budgeting strategies and also can abide by the restrictions placed on it in this ordinance amendment. Tracy, does that help if that happens?
Yes, because I need all of that to be able to give you the revised numbers for Thursday.
Got it. Sounds good. Okay. And so Adam, likewise, this will happen one way or the other, but we should, under no circumstances, deal with the budget before we deal with the amendment to the ARPA budget. Because so just in terms of sequential order of things. But okay. All right. Anything further to add to the discussion item before we end it? Okay. Tracy, I apologize that the process sort of didn't include you here from the outset, but thank you for advocating strongly enough that it will include you before we get to an actual vote on this thing.
Thank you.
Okay. And moving on to item 2, I guess. Oh, excuse me. Derek, can I push you back to deal with Kevin so that he can get out of here?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's no problem at all. Yep.
Sounds good. Okay. We're going to move to item number 3, a resolution for various insurance needs for policy year 1123 through 1124. Molly?
Thank you, Mayor. What you have is the renewal for next year for the city's property and liability insurance, umbrella and excess liability insurance, and workers' compensation insurance. We have on the line Kevin Fink. We are looking at a total of $776,420. Right now, that is excluding the cyber liability, as the insurance company is still working through our numbers. And I can let Mr. Fink explain what's going on with that as well.
Yeah, cyber still in process. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Kevin, please.
Oh, all right. Let's say cyber still in process. I'm hoping we're going to be able to obtain terms for you public sector or government and higher ed are probably two of the least desirable classes of business in this, just due to the ever escalating ransomware attacks that are impacting those two specific sectors. And insurance companies have taken a tremendous amount of losses. They are demanding much greater cybersecurity controls than what they have in the past. And I am working with Molly and your IT. We've answered all the questions. A concern has to do with basically if you don't have multi-factor authentication, it's less than all the fingers on one hand of the insurance companies that might be willing to offer a quote. So I hope to have something prior to the council meeting on Thursday, but I can't promise that. I will try to request an extension of the existing policy. We're unable to perform on the cyber by Thursday. But the balance of the program, I don't want to steal Molly's thunder on it, but given the current state of the insurance marketplace, I think it's a reasonable renewal. The workers' comp probably could be a little bit more competitive, but there are a few options. Again, with government, police and fire, it's presumption of injury for heart and lung, which eliminates the number of markets. And I think they keep the rates a little higher on the workers' comp side to offset concerns on the casualty side of the house. We have taken all the RVT properties off of the schedule. Number of law enforcement officers up a little bit, but on a weighted average basis, the property and liability package exposure basis is down about 6%. The rate increase about 6%. So it's almost a wash. The difference for that part is, $1,300 less than last year. The workers' comp, obviously, with a tremendous amount of payroll with RVT off of, the county's books, resulted in about $146,000 decrease over the expiring program. So in total, your program costs are down about $147,700.
Thank you, Kevin. Eric, what questions do you have on this item?
You had mentioned about RVT properties. The concern that I have is making sure that the properties that there is some debate about that the city still has possession of, that the federal government and state government is claiming they should have property of. Have they been included on this still?
I have taken them off and have them separately insured under the transit pool program. What I had suggested to Molly and Tracy a couple of weeks ago was that to have your solicitor or insurance counsel or someone draw up an agreement that requires River Valley Transit to provide insurance coverage on the buildings at their estimated replacement cost value pending transfer of the title. Whenever that gets filed with I guess the county recorder or whoever handles that. But that way you'd have a written agreement. There's two ways you can insure a property, either through ownership or through contractual obligation. So you'd have a contractual obligation from RVT to provide the insurance coverage on those properties. It's built into their program already, which renewed on December 1st.
And that agreement was provided by Austin to us just last week.
Okay, so yeah, if I could get a copy of that, I'd appreciate it, Tracy. Thank you.
Will do.
All right, but we technically, the city still owns these buildings. They're not in possession of RVT.
I can't speak to that. That's my understanding that the deeds or title, whatever you want to call it, is not transferred. It's just.
I'm sorry, Kevin. That was an unfair question to direct towards you. I'm sorry about that, Mr. Fink. I meant that for the administration and just as again more of a curiosity question. I know it's been mentioned before by the administration at council meetings that they're working on that. I didn't believe that the PennDOT was interested in those buildings and when we were going to see any kind of resolution on that, because I think that would affect this quote, whether it's in July when all that gets resolved. And then this part, Mr. Fink, would be a question for you. How does that change if come July, the city is able to actually maintain ownership of those buildings?
ballpark guess right now, I would say it's going to add $60,000 to the cost for probably roughly 10 cents per hundred of value. And it's, I think, around $62 million. That sounds about right. I could pull them up and look, do all the
Right.
specifics.
Just a ballpark is appreciated at the moment because there's a whole lot of what ifs in that scenario. So
Yeah, like I said, I don't know how that issue is going to be resolved between, you know, the feds, PennDOT, and the city. I was advised that, yeah, they were working on transferring the deeds. It was initially going to happen in September, then it got delayed, you know, another 30 days, another 30 days. And the last that I understood, I thought title was going to transfer sometime before year end 2022, but it appears that's not correct any longer.
that issue hasn't been brought back before us. It was brought to our transit oversight committee back in September, and we have not discussed it further since.
Okay.
Mhm.
I mean, I'll do what you guys want me to do. It's just a matter of, you know, like I said, right now I'm operating on the basis that, you know, this is eminent. I just don't know if it's immediately or, you know, how eminent it is. Maybe that's, again, that could be incorrect. But
And with the information that I currently have, I would say that it's not imminent. And my biggest critique of this policy is I would like to see those buildings insured by the city versus a contract with RVT until that day comes. I don't feel comfortable with us having the agreement with RVT in that regard.
I share some of your concerns, Eric. On the other hand, I can appreciate that attempting to adjust all of that mid-year might be. So what's the administration's thinking on this, especially since it appears as though we will not have the contract in place for the beginning of the year? Derek?
I guess initially I'm thinking we could probably talk to Jill Nagy before Thursday's meet, maybe get some input from her to see how, you know, what the best path forward might be here.
Yeah. It'd be one thing if we were, you know, I would feel a little better about it if council was reviewing and acting on that agreement for Thursday as well. But the earliest it would be enacted then is the 6th of January, and to see us leave a number of disputed properties with a bunch of federal and state money invested in them uninsured for even 6 days makes me a bit nervous.
No, right. Yeah, I definitely do
can't
not
do
want
that.
anything uninsured for sure, obviously. So, sorry, Kevin, go ahead. What were you going to say?
no, I just gonna say you can't do that without being subject to all kinds of criticism.
Yeah.
And Kevin, to clarify, they are currently, as of December 1st, insured by RVT.
Okay. So the RVT has taken out an insurance policy on all of those pieces of
Yes.
property.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, and the MOU is simply,
Has Kevin you reviewed that?
Yeah, I handle the program for the transit pool, so
Got
And Austin was working on that as well, Councilwoman Mealy.
Okay. But so there will be no lapse in coverage, Kevin. Those properties are fully covered by your company through the transit pool.
not by my company, by the
Right.
Insurance companies. Only
well,
my
how
company if I make, yeah, I know, only if I make a mistake, and I don't want to do that. So I just want to make sure that they're insured for their full estimated replacement cost under one of the two programs. It's actually slightly better coverage under the transit pool for the Peter Herdick Museum, because the city's insurer has it separately scheduled. That's not a terrible thing by itself, but it's not under what's called a blanket limit.
Mhm.
A blanket limit, you have your full $50-some million blanket limit. So if you've got a building scheduled for $3 million and say a tornado or some other horrible disaster wipes the whole thing out,
Mhm.
and you're off by a couple $1 million, as long as it doesn't exceed the blanket policy limit of 50 million, you get full replacement to rebuild with like kind and quality materials. it would be on it. What's called, this one is pulled out separately under Travelers program with the city on a scheduled limit. That's not a problem as long as the scheduled limit is adequate, and most losses aren't total losses. It's more of an academic thing than any, than it is a real life issue. But, the purpose of this is to transfer, unacceptable risk, and the city has less risk actually having it under the transit pools program just because of the Peter Herdick Museum.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm trying to think how to say this succinctly and accurately. I feel like I'm rambling, so stop me if I'm not making
No,
sense.
I think we get the point. The properties are currently included in RVT's coverage. There will be no lapse in coverage, even if we don't act on an agreement requiring RVT to cover them until the 6th of January. And all of this, of course, is in anticipation at some point early in 2023, correct, Eric? Of us sorting out possession of certain parcels.
Yes,
that-
from my understanding, the survey is completed, yes, and it will be very early in 2023. Likely January. I don't want to, don't hold me to that without speaking directly to Jill, but I believe very early in 2023, yes.
Okay. So Eric, you remain concerned about the fact that we're not covering those parcels until that point when we sort out exactly who owns them? Or
I would prefer that the city be the one to hold the coverage until we sort out who owns it. But that's my personal preference. I look at it from the ownership standpoint of, I wouldn't want somebody who's going to be buying my personal home for their insurance to cover my
right
risk.
Your lapse. Yeah, I mean, I understand your point. Yeah, I'm not certain, honestly, what makes it less complicated at this point, because I think what we have to balance against that concern, Eric, is the fact that I think we would have to have a special meeting. Well, Kevin, could you adapt this agreement to include those properties before Thursday's meeting at this point?
Let's see, probably. I don't want to promise, but probably.
Okay. Yeah, so Eric, so that's the question, Eric, is it, it's possible we'd have to schedule a special meeting later in December to make certain that we were, if we wanted to amend this agreement to include those properties. And unfortunately, it's just the two of us here. I'm not certain to what extent those concerns, I don't know if you've spoken to anyone else on council, if those concerns are shared by other folks on council.
I have not.
Okay, yeah, and I have not either. I've not heard anything about this item one way or the other. As long as we have active, and we do have active leasing agreements with RVT on all of these premises, correct, Eric?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
So we are currently tenants of these properties, Eric, until they possibly become ours toward the beginning of the year. So it would seem to me as though we're covered in the sense that they currently are considered to belong to RVT. Were anything to happen, it would be, potentially could be our fault as a tenant, but they would be covered, they would be insured through RVT as is currently reflects the accurate assessment of their ownership.
This may be my mistake then. I didn't think that we were renting the Streets and Parks building.
That's the only one that's not at this point, but that would be covered under the city insurance, correct? Or the Streets and Parks, we do not have a lease agreement. That as of right now is still being worked out.
And I thought that was one of the buildings that was in question for the ownership.
Correct.
So that's really the building that I'm most concerned about.
Okay, so that building is not included in this current insurance contract, Kevin?
I can tell you the specific buildings if, give me a second here.
Sure.
The locations at 1500 West 3rd Street and the fuel pump canopy at 1530 West 3rd Street have been taken out. The transit stoop, I don't know what that is.
That's RVT. sorry, that initial one there, that's RVT and
1,500, okay, so streets and
Yeah.
parks is 1,550 or something?
yeah, that's,
Yeah, the Allied Storage Building is still on the city's schedule. And the American Building, bus storage at 1550, still on the city's schedule. Public Services Building, the Morton Storage Building, the Police Evidence Storage Building, those are all still on the city's schedule.
Okay, so then I
Okay.
think alleviated your concerns, right, Eric? We're
You
still,
did. And forgive me for not just asking which buildings up front.
That's okay. I I get it, and that's due diligence. Yeah, the other ones, like I said, the transit scoop we've taken out. We've taken out the parking garage at 11 West Church Street and some brick and electronic sign there, and then the trade and transit building. Number 2 at 144 West Third has been taken out.
as well as number 1?
Yeah, hold on, and that's, yeah, the only thing that we have for the city there, I believe are, hold on, let me find it, here it is. Nope, that's Peter Herdick. I believe police department contents at the Peter Herdick location. The building has been taken out and separately insured, but your contents, the city's contents, just like at trade and transit, you've got at 100, your contents are still there.
Mhm.
And let's see, trade and transit. Gotta find where the doggone thing is on here. Oh, here it is, city contents only.
Got it.
It's way overstated, but yeah, it's still, the building is out, it's separately insured in the transit pool.
Mhm.
We
Got
don't
it.
have, we've got $11 million of contents there. I mean, in total, the city's got a blanket limit of about 18.8 million of contents, but I know that I highly doubt that much of it is at the trade and transit building. But again, the whole, it's a blanket limit. We wanted to have adequate, make sure we have adequate contents values for the city.
Got it.
Kevin.
So it sounds like we're covered then, as long as we've got the streets, the public services building covered.
Yeah, Molly has a Excel
Yeah.
spreadsheet that has all the properties and their values and what's where.
Excellent. All right. Then can we move on to just one quick question for me? You said overall, we would likely have seen an increase of about 6%, except that because
Yeah, the weighted average, exposure increase. Yep. Crime is not as highly weighted as some of the liability lines. So if you look at your expenditures, your payroll without RVT, all those different factors, your number of law enforcement officers, it's about a 6% increase in exposure basis. So in simplistic terms, if you had $1 million of property, now you have, $1,060,000 in property type of thing. So the weighted average change is about 6%. The rate is up in almost an equal amount,
Mhm.
which is what I would say is probably not unreasonable in this insurance marketplace, and given, the city's historic experience. This past year is, so far it's still green, but this past year, the city's loss experience has been much better. But if you look historically, it's,
right.
you've had your hits.
Yeah, no, we know that. I guess what I'm asking is our insurance coverage definitely would have gone up. It sounds like closer to something
Yes.
something like 10% had it not been for subtracting out RBT's employees and RBT's.
Somewhere right around there, right? That's the ballpark guesstimate, correct?
So we should anticipate obviously an increase in, or we would anticipate, I think we are putting our coverage out for RFP this year, but we should anticipate an increase in this number moving into 2024, one way or the other, whether we continue with Gallagher or with.
Yeah, I don't see much change in the insurance marketplace going forward. But some guy's supposed to be a genius and back in 2017 said we'll never see another hard insurance market, and a year and a half later it started to change. So nobody really knows.
Yeah, it's true. Well, especially, now a crystal ball seems like it might be more useful than all the other prediction methods we've got out there. But anyway, you will, will you be there on Thursday?
I'll make myself available starting at 7 p.m. Thursday evening.
Yeah, my guess is this is pretty late on the agenda, and I think we have some folks coming for other items. So you might be better off to ask Derek, but I would guess he wouldn't need to be available starting at 7. It was just the cyber liability question that I thought, whether if you have a number for us, that would be great. If you don't, then an explanation might be. I don't know that I would feel competent to explain what was going on with our cyber liability coverage, and I don't know that Molly would necessarily want to be taking the lead on that one either. Molly, yeah, well, it would be helpful if you could be available. Just so that we
the only thing I'm reluctant to do, I prefer not to have to go into detail on what the specific deficiencies in the city's cybersecurity are on a public forum. I don't think that serves the city.
Yeah, no, and that, okay, so I think Adam Yoder's already off here, but Eric, maybe we should make a point of reaching out to the rest of council and let them know that that's something that it wouldn't be wise to discuss in a public meeting on Thursday.
Yeah.
I understand your point, Kevin, but you don't think about that necessarily until you've asked the question, and all of a sudden you realize, maybe I didn't want the answer.
Yeah, you don't want to let everyone know which doors are unlocked.
Exactly. Eric, is there anything else that you wanted to know about this before we move forward?
Not at this time. Kevin, I do appreciate you answering those questions for me, though.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Kevin.
Would you like me to stick around, or should I?
No, I think you're fine. You're fine to get rolling, Kevin. Thanks for your
All
help
right,
today.
thank you. We'll see everyone on Thursday, and hopefully I'll have cyber for you prior to that.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Kevin.
All right. Then moving on to item number 2, a resolution to authorize the submission of an application for phase 2 of Strategic Management Planning Program, STMP funding. Mayor Slaughter.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairwoman Millie, Councilman Biter. What you have, this is simply a resolution that's required by DCED as we move into the phase 2 for the financial software, the HR software, and then the first due software from the fire department that DCED will be contributing 70% towards that as part of our financial strategic plan. So this is really a formality on DCED's end, just showing that the city is ready to move forward with the phase 2 implementation of these recommendations that we've discussed the last few weeks here. And there was a representative from DCED here, but he was having technical difficulties on his end. But he should be available Thursday evening.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think this is pretty cut and dry. I was hoping that maybe there was further funding we were going after, Derek, but presuming not.
Not yet. I mean, there is that we will in 23, but this is the one that we already went after that's been secured.
Great. Eric, any questions?
I do not have any questions.
Okay, well, that was quick and easy. All right, moving on to item number 4. A resolution authorizing execution of an agreement between the City of Williamsport and Governmental Finance Solutions. Mayor Slaughter.
Yes, good afternoon again. This is a resolution, again, with Tracy Rash, her company, Government Finance Solutions, extending her agreement. It was, as was discussed last Thursday, in the original agreement put in for 120 days, or I believe it was $85,000, I believe. The 120 days ended last Friday. So this is the agreement that would extend her contract to allow her to continue to work on behalf of the city.
Okay.
No, and there's been no changes. This is the original agreement. There's been no changes to it at all. As far as, compensation, anything like that, no, all the same.
Okay. And no changes. There weren't any sections that we'd struck on the first pass that are reinstated or anything,
Nope.
correct?
Nope, it's all exactly the same.
Okay. Tracy, you're really going to keep on doing this?
I really want to see the city succeed. So I want it to go in the right direction, and I want to keep helping get you there.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure you were on board. We certainly appreciate your efforts thus far, and it does seem as though we've achieved some levels of clarity in the finance office, albeit there's still a lot of murky elements and unexamined paper copies of things lying on your floor, I believe. But we've definitely cleaned up some financial messes that we had been in previously. So we appreciate your efforts. Eric, do you have any questions on this item? I would
I
imagine.
do not have any questions, just a comment. I will be proposing that we put another time limit on renewing this contract. Tracy, I do appreciate everything that you've done for the city so far. I just, because of the amount that we're spending, I do want to make sure that we have a check on this, so that way it doesn't run away from us.
Yep. I would agree with Eric. I think that a periodic review of services and where we're at is wise, because this is obviously substantially more than we will eventually be hoping to be paying for financial management within the finance department. And so at some point, right, as much as we've enjoyed having you with us, Tracy, and as much as we've in many ways profited from our experiences with you, I think we'll at some point we'll have to part. And so that will bring that back to mind at some point in the next 6 months or so. I'm assuming, Eric, correct?
Yeah, I wanted to just consider what the time frame is with what's coming up in the next 60, 90, 120 days and what we may be coming up against with the city. So that was just a conversation I would have with a few other members of council as well.
Got it. Sounds good. So we'll discuss that on Thursday. I think to the extent that my input is desired in that, I would probably advocate for something around the 9-month mark, to be frank, only because if we're hoping to bring someone else into the office and have them have Tracy sort of communicate a style of management in the office to them, we'll need to presume that it will take us. I think we're still at the 6 months till that higher point. So that would be my position on it, but we can discuss that further on Thursday. Okay. Does anyone else have anything to point out about this item? Okay, hearing nothing. We'll move on to item number 5, any related items? Does anyone have anything to introduce for the good of the order? Tracy, I would just say if you reach out to me, if you don't mind, if you feel as though we're not achieving enough clarity on this, the reserve fund question within the budget for Thursday. And maybe I can help to smooth things over if there's any continuing, lack of understanding there. But aside from that, hearing no other related items out there, I guess I'll take a motion to adjourn, Eric.
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. Have an awesome couple of days, everyone. We'll see you on Thursday, ideally in person, but if the weather really turns out to be a doozy, maybe remotely. Have a great time. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, Chris.
See you, Sam.
We didn't even get to your.
You're very scratchy.
We didn't get to use our owl. I just wanted to try it
You need
out,
a better
see what it
connection.
looks like.
I can tell you right now that your audio is indicative of poor network connection.
It won't even.
2022, 2:30 p.m. Present today is, we have Councilman Vincent Pelisi, we have Mayor Derek Slaughter, we have Scott Livermore from Streets and Parks, we have our Mayor Derek Slaughter, and let me see who else. We have Janice Frank, our city clerk, and of course we have Chris Black, who is our IT person, and Mike Miller is here from the Water Authority. And I think I've gotten everybody. I don't think I missed anybody.
Councilwoman Eric Smithgall is here as well from the Water Authority.
Oh, I didn't see his name up here. I'm sorry. Eric, hello, Eric, wherever you are.
We can't forget John Sander there.
Oh, and John Sanders is in the back. There he is waving in the background. I told you all the good people are at this meeting. Don't let that get out though. All right. There are 3 things on our agenda today. First one on the agenda is resolution releasing the City of Williamsport's ARPA funds to the Williamsport Municipal Water Authority. Adam Yoder was supposed to present this, but I think he's teaching, so he won't be here. So this was already voted on as far as what we were budgeting with the ARPA funds. So this was done how many months ago? I can't remember how many months ago, when we did a budget of what we were doing. So the 730,000 is what we're allocating to the water